Hi, welcome to the Raising Empowered Kids interview series. I'm Jill Deneen, and I'm your host today as we talk to Robin LaCross, who's been running this summit for you. And she's going to tell us today about how to talk to your kids about sex so that you can raise sexually empowered young adults. Robin LaCross is a holistic health practitioner, and she specializes in women's reproductive health. She's been teaching natural birth control methods for like 25 years now. And she does this because she's really passionate about making sure that young women grow up knowing and understanding their bodies and their cycles. Robin's on a mission to reduce unintended pregnancies and the spread of STDs in the world by changing the way that mothers talk to their children about growing up, about sex, and about how to keep themselves safe. Robin's the founder of the HPV Education Project to raise awareness about the virus, about new advances in HPV testing, and holistic methods of promoting cervical health. Armed with a holistic health approach, coupled with the latest advances in technology, she's empowering individuals to protect themselves against HPV. So it's great to be here with you, Robin, and thanks for inviting me to be your sounding board for this. So I'm curious, how did you get started in this? How did you get interested in helping parents talk to their kids about sex?
Well, thank you, Jill. First of all, I want to acknowledge you and appreciate you for being here with me today. I really appreciate your time and energy, and thanks for coming on to interview me.
Of course, I love what you do.
Thank you. And I got started in this, I think a lot of us on this particular event that I've put together, we got started because it was personal necessity. There was a need in our lives, and there was a gap in information or our experiences. And it's the same for me. You know, growing up, I was fortunate enough to have sex education in school. My mom talked to me about sex and menstruation. And so I really received, the best that, my school system and my parents had to offer. And what I discovered was I was actually still really clueless about sex and how to protect myself, even in the most basic of circumstances. And so, I became sexually active at a young age. At 14 is when I decided to give my virginity to a person of my choosing. There was a sexual predator in our family. And so basically what happened was, my parents found out that my boyfriend and I had sex. They broke us up. When I went to had my second boyfriend, and my parents decided to put me on the pill at that point. And I stayed on the pill from 15 to about the age of 20. When I was 19, I was moving towards more of a holistic lifestyle and started thinking that I really just didn't want to be putting these hormones into my body anymore. And what I realized was that I actually didn't know how to protect myself if I wasn't using the pill from getting pregnant. And actually, STDs weren't really even a thought in my mind at that point, in spite of having, sex education at school twice, and also, having the talk from my mom. So really, what happened was I ended up staying on the pill a year longer than I really wanted to, because I just didn't know how to protect myself. And so I started looking for information. And this, of course, is back in the day before the internet. And so most of my information was coming from like bookstores or sometimes coffee shops. Like I'd find like little pamphlets of printed information, that somebody had put together and disseminated. And every once in a while I would stumble across a gem, that would just really add to my information and my knowledge base. And one day I came across a book on natural family planning. And what that is essentially, it's a religiously flavored book on how to get pregnant. And so it was very eye-opening. Of course, I wasn't in a place in my life where I wanted to get pregnant, but basically what it did was alerted me to the fact that my body was like doing all these things inside, and that I could learn to tell when I was fertile.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I wanted more information. And so I started going to the college libraries, like the medical libraries, and looking in the research journals to find out what the scientists knew about the female cycle, about the early, early parts of conception. And then also I was finding information about herbs and how herbs affected fertility, which I found very fascinating. And so it kind of became like a personal PhD in life. And I just spent like several years just really like diving into this information and learning more. And as I was learning about this stuff, it was just blowing my mind. I mean, really. And the question that I kept coming back to was, why doesn't my mom know this stuff to teach me? I mean, obviously the scientists know about it. And why isn't this information, being disseminated and that my mom can, turn around and educate me? And of course, I knew that, she did the very best she could. She gave me everything that, that she had to give me, and it was still woefully inadequate. And so I started sharing this information. It became, a passion of mine, because I felt like, what if every woman grew up understanding this about her body and having this kind of level of appreciation for her body and cycle. I know for me personally, it was extremely empowering to be able to determine, like when I was fertile and apply that information, as to whether or not I wanted to get pregnant each cycle, which I, was at a time in my life where I didn't want to be pregnant. And so I was able to learn to use that information to avoid getting pregnant. And that's been my primary form of birth control over the last 25 years.
Yeah, it really, as you kind of got to the end of that, like it really strikes me how much I imagine that changed your life, like your internal life, not even just that now you had all these management tools, but the self-knowledge, the self-understanding, the awareness of your cycle, that turning your attention inward, all these things that our culture doesn't support very well are also embedded inside of having this scientific knowledge. And, when you were kind of posing a rhetorical question about like, why didn't my mom have this? Like, that's where I realized like the enormity of what it means to have this information. So I'm wondering, like, what does it mean? Like, why is it so important that parents are that educator? Like, why do we want to hear this so much from our moms?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, one of my reasons for wanting to give this information to parents, in particular to moms, is because moms are always there. It's like from the time, you have a little baby, you bring this little baby into the world until, you grow up and become an adult, mom is always there. And I feel like these are conversations that are, built over time. So like when a child is very small, you can start having these conversations with your child, and it has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with boundaries and permission and respect and teaching body parts, learning about your own body and empathizing with others. And so all of these lessons, all these core lessons are actually taught very young. And then as the children get older, then you can layer in, levels of complexity, like how you're relating to friends, and later, how this applies to having romantic relationships and how you get consent along each step of the way, and this kind of thing. So I really feel like, parents have this amazing opportunity to have these powerful and important conversations over the course of a child's, development. And it has the potential really to have a huge impact on, how we relate in the world. What our sexuality is really at the core of our being. It's like how we relate to the outside world, how the outside world relates to us. And then on top of just like that basic, relating, to the outside world is all of this internal stuff too. And, I like to use the image of an onion, because it's like there is so many different layers and different nuances and I mean, sex is like a huge topic, and there's so many facets that we can talk about. And it's like a source of endless conversation if we really wanted to have it to be.
Right. Having been through learning about how to have these conversations with you, since I have two teenage girl and an almost teenage girl, and you and I have talked about this at length, that sense that too, that instead of having like one big, super awkward, incredibly difficult talk where I'm going to like try to give you everything, this sense of like a series of small talks not only makes it easier for the kids to hear, it makes it easier to tell. It makes the story easier to talk about, because the truth is that sex is still a funny kind of taboo in our culture, and in some respects, and despite it also being super prevalent. And so, yeah, just my experience with it was that those little conversations over time, like letting it be about consent and, body autonomy and all these things, was a really powerful thing. So when people are starting to think about talking to their kids about sex and things like that, like can you share what kind of pointers you give when somebody's starting to try to be like, okay, I want to do this. I want to talk to my kid in these incremental ways. I want this to be a bigger conversation. And I understand how giving them information is empowering and all that kind of stuff. Like, where do they start?
Yeah. So, there's two things here. So first is where to start. And then there's also, how much information can your kid actually absorb at once? And so I want to like touch on the point of, having it as one big conversation. It's like 90% of what you say is going to go in one ear and out the other. It's like, as humans, we need exposure to information around 7 times or so before it actually really starts to stick and make sense and that kind of thing. And my mom had the talk with me, and I remember the stuff that she said about menstruation, but the rest of it is just kind of a blur. And there's been a lot of research, the surveys that have been conducted saying, looking at parents, did you talk to your kid about this? And the parent said, yes, I did. And then they'll go to the kid and say, did you talk to, did your parent talk to you about this? And the kid will be like, what? No, no. And so like, it's like you missed the boat kind of thing. And so it's like, it's really important to like have these conversations and communicate that information or the message that you want to deliver in different ways. And so by having, lots of little short conversations, not only do you normalize it and make it, as, normal behavior, but especially if you're starting young, if you haven't had these conversations and now you have a teenager and you want to start having these conversations, even though you don't have the history, there's still no reason, to not start having these conversations. And you might have to start small, and maybe it's about a conversation that's not sex related kind of thing. And so you can just like open the door to having more intimate sharing conversations about topics that aren't so like charged like sex is, for example. And so you can create opportunities for those conversations to have, take place, whether it's, you create time, like maybe you create a weekly tradition where you and your child sit out on the porch and sip iced tea, like once or twice a week and talk about things. Or maybe you go on a camping trip, like once over the summer, and you've got, 24 or 48 hours to, talk about these different things. I know, Jill, that you personally, have a tradition with your girls where you take them camping overnight, and it's specifically to have these conversations. And so the girls have started, I know your oldest in particular has, started looking forward to these annual camping trips to have, the talk. And, it's like, and I don't want people to wait for the annual conversation necessarily, but I love that you have created out, carved out this space of alone time with, each of your children separately, where you can go and spend time and, deliver some information, give them a chance to digest it and ask questions, and then maybe deliver some more. And, and so like you've got like this ebb and flow of, conversation and silence, and they can think about things and come back with more questions. And, I think it's really beautiful.
Thanks. That is one of my favorite things. And it is an annual camping trip. But what I've noticed got created out of that was I get a lot of questions all the time. And so I think it has provided like that framework for support in having those conversations repeatedly, because they know I'm in, right? And, my secret of that, or the thing I don't tell the kids, is that by taking them camping, they're my captive audience.
Yes.
Right? So I bring crafts and things like that to keep, especially my younger one. She'll put up with the talk part in order to get the craft part. So it just depends on the kid and what works. But both of them do come to me in between, and they do look forward to those camping trips. And I think they're empowering in the way we were saying before, that sense of it's so much bigger than the talk part. It's about like, who are you in your life, and how is sexuality part of your life, and all of that. What does it mean to be a woman? And so, yeah, it's so much bigger and super fun. Yeah. And those were all rooted in those early conversations that you and I talked about years and years ago, about consent, about thinking about the message that we're sending before we're ever thinking that we're having a sexual conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, just laying that whole foundation, creating that environment where kids feel safe and empowered to come to you, with something when, something hits the fan. Like another example that I can think of too is, when your daughter came to you with a story that she had heard, from, like 3 times removed kind of thing, where, some boys in class were talking about raping one of the girls, and do they know what they were actually saying? I mean, I don't know, but the fact of the matter is that your daughter came to you with this information, and she felt, safe and comfortable. And then the way that you handled it too, I really appreciate, like you went to the school, there wasn't like people being made bad and wrong kind of thing, but it was really an opportunity for the education level to be, raised among all the students.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, the kids, by the time they're in middle school or high school, they really don't want to be talked down to or shamed or told what they're doing wrong. And that a lot of my communication about sexuality with my kids, and then when needed with the school system, was about let's teach them. What can we teach them? What can we offer them, instead of like, what can we demand from them? Which, once you're in this age, that's a way more effective communication technique. And so again, this thing is so much bigger than even just having the scientific information to relay. It becomes about communication and about relationships and about who we are in them and how we know ourselves and how we know other people. And yeah, it's it's a small topic, and it holds so much. And then so much possibility for building those good things out of those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the communication piece is so important, because, the way that you relate to your child and how you react to pieces of information that they bring you is really important. Because if you're one of these people who has big reactions, when somebody, has like a small, thing that happens, then it makes kids more sensitive to like coming to you with something that they know is like a big thing. It's like you already have a strong reaction to something small, and now they're about to like drop this bomb on you, and they're afraid. It's like they're afraid of your reaction. And in general, most kids want to please their parents, and so there's a lot of, I think, motivation around making sure not to disappoint parents, and, avoiding getting into trouble and things like that.
Well, in some ways, those are sort of old cultural conversations, because my sense is that even though my girls can sometimes be kind of uncomfortable with what we're talking about, especially my younger one, she's like, I don't want to talk about sex, or I don't want to talk about my body, they do want parents to show up in those really uncomfortable places. And again, it's a bigger teaching place even then, so that it becomes okay to sit in the uncomfortable places. It's okay to not know and go need to look something up. It's okay. And, to have resources from this raising empowered kids stuff. I still have all my files, and every time I'm getting ready to go out on the camping trip, I go look through them. Like, what do I need to be saying? What haven't I said yet? Because there's a wide range of what they're able to receive over the years of their life, and ways that communication works and don't work as they age and stuff like that. And but it's one of the things that's really striking me is that old cultural conversation idea, and how much things have kind of changed, like how much more open and willing parents are to be in these uncomfortable places now. And it strikes me a lot of things have changed over, since we got our talk.
So much has changed, so much. I mean, in social media,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Kids are being exposed to things at a much younger age than we ever were. It's like, when we were, looking at Dad's Playboy magazine and finding his porn, hidden in the closet is completely different than what kids are looking at today with internet, porn and this kind of thing. And the people who produce porn are, to a certain degree, actually marketing towards children, because, once you've got, hooked them at that young age, you've got a client for life kind of thing. And so I think it's really important for kids to have like that counterbalance, because even if you don't talk to them, they are definitely getting exposed to information about sex on a daily basis from a very young age. And if you're not there to say, it's like, oh, well, hey, it's like this porn is, it's created with this target audience in mind, and this isn't actually what women find pleasurable. And, having those conversations. And I know a lot of parents are really uncomfortable talking about like things like pleasure, like the whole idea of talking to your children about masturbation makes a lot of parents uncomfortable. Yet at the same time, this is an important conversation to have, because, I would venture to say that the majority of us would like to raise sexually healthy young adults. I know it can be really hard when you're still thinking of your child as this sweet, innocent, young, girl or boy who you just don't want to burst that bubble. But then I would invite you to, think about, well, what is it about sex do you think is dirty or bad? Or, why are you responding that way? Like, what is behind your thought process there that makes you think that educating your child about sex is going to destroy their innocence? And
that's such a hard one as a parent, because like you said, you look at your little cherub, right? And you're like, they're such a baby, or like I'll tell my 12-year-old daughter sometimes, like, you're always my baby. And she's kind of like, not really. Because as parents, that's how we look at our kids. And so it's hard. It's really hard to admit that they're going to grow up. Like most parents, with my oldest going to high school, virtually every parent I've talked to recently has been like, oh my God, they're growing up so fast. But that's what happens. If we opt not to do the education when our window is open, they grow up fast. And they grow up learning from all these places that weren't there when we were kids, from the internet, how easily porn gets passed around, and how it's easy to search for something totally innocent and still end up with porn on your screen. We have to teach them that's part of our job, is to teach them as they're growing. And this is a hard part. And so it's easier to step in with someone like you, or with a group of moms who are like, okay, I don't want to, but I will, because I know that they're going to grow up with or without me. And I would like them to grow up with my information.
Yeah, and there's 2 points to that too. One is, you get to wrap this information in your own values, whereas the values is missing from anything that they see on the internet and anything that they learn in school. In general, teachers can't, wrap the information and values. There's kind of like that separation in the school system. So really it falls on the parents to, if you want your kids to think about sex in a healthy way, it's really up to you to make sure that you impart those values and give that knowledge to help kids, have that appreciation for, how sex is different. It's like, it's easy for, on one hand, to like talk about the mechanics and that kind of thing of sex, but what's not maybe as easy is to talk about like the emotional attachment that comes with it and the biochemical processes that are happening within the body when you connect with somebody, sexually. It's like, there's like hormones that are happening that are creating bonding and, all these different things. And so then when the relationship goes away, if there even was a relationship, then, kids aren't necessarily prepared to deal with emotions that are coming up. And, with kids, their emotions are amplified. It's like their frontal cortex is not fully developed, so the more, ancient parts of the brains, like the survival instincts, the emotional pieces are, more activated. And so you've got all these different things that are happening. It's like you've got the hormones of puberty that are, inspiring the biological urge to reproduce. So you've got, the interest in opposite sex or same sex, whichever your, direction your child happens to lean. But so you've got all these hormones that are happening. And then when you engage with somebody sexually, you've got more hormones that are creating these bonds and these feelings and these connections. You've got the amplified, emotional responses. And then if you go and add alcohol or drugs in on top of that, it's like you've got a recipe for some serious issues when, talking about, for example, like how things have changed over the years and the degree to which, getting consent, each step of the process as children start to engage sexually and start to explore those waters. It's really important for parents to have those conversations and make sure that their kids are prepared to have those important conversations, because the things that we were spoon-fed, like say, for example, in the 80s and the movies, it's like a lot of those, behaviors like date rapey, kind of questionable messaging that we received, this kind of behavior was normalized and it's not okay anymore. And so it's really important that, girls and boys are educated on the way things have changed, over the years.
Yeah.
So I know that was a lot there.
So I'm thinking as we're talking and how much things have changed, and especially when you're talking about social media, you're often talking about middle schoolers and high schoolers again. And like, so I know one of the things that I'm facing, and since this is one of your specialties also, is, we're faced at the doctor's office with looking into the HPV vaccine and stuff to guard against cervical cancer. I'm wondering, like, parents facing this with their kids, like, what can you tell us that could help us make those decisions easier? So I'm finding that to be harder than a lot of the previous medical decisions and, for my kids.
Yeah, so HPV is an interesting thing. So it's actually our most common sexually transmitted virus. They say approximately 70% of the sexually active population will be exposed to the virus over the course of their lifetime. A lot of kids, statistically, by the time kids are age 24, they've been exposed to, sexually transmitted diseases. Many of them have become pregnant unintentionally. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in that whole age group, from teenage to early 20s. And in particular, HPV is something that has come up a lot, especially now that we have a vaccine for it. Historically, it wasn't really spoken about that much because there wasn't any testing for it. So basically, the only way to find out that you had the virus is they would check when your pap smear comes back as abnormal. So it's basically an after the fact. It's like, oh, you already have this sexually transmitted virus, which can be very shocking for a lot of women, especially, if you like did all the right things and you took your partner like to Planned Parenthood or the doctors or wherever to a clinic to get checked for sexually transmitted diseases, and you ask them, like check for everything. They are actually not testing for HPV, and they probably won't tell you that it's not included in the standard sexually transmitted disease panel. And the reason for that is we just haven't had a test available outside of, like, say, the university setting where they can test people. So if you talk to your doctor, there's like a 99% chance that if you're a man going to your doctor saying, I would like to be tested for HPV, you'll probably be told that there is no test for you and not to worry about it, that it's not that big of a deal. And so there's a couple problems with that. One, it is it is a little bit of a big deal. It has been associated with cancer. Just because you have HPV does not mean you will get cancer. There are, over 100 strains of the virus. It's a wart virus, so it's responsible for warts that you'll find on your hands, your feet. It also is responsible for genital warts, and it can cause cancer. So of the strains, there's about 40 or so that can affect the genital tract. Most of them don't have any impact at all. The different strains of the virus that are responsible for the genital warts are strains 6 and 11. And then the strains that are associated with cancer, there's about 14 different strains. 16 and 18 are the ones that are responsible for about probably 80% of the cervical cancer that's out there. And also for men, lately, historically with the vaccine and when talking about HPV, it's mostly been a woman's problem. However, we are finding that HPV is affecting men. And in particular, it seems to be responsible for the majority of the oral and throat cancers that men are getting. Like, they're being diagnosed with oral and throat cancer at roughly the same rate as women are being diagnosed with cervical cancer. Now, keep in mind, we do screen women for cervical cancer. However, we're not really screening, men or women for that matter for oral and throat cancers. And so I think there's a lot that we could do in that area. Maybe dentists can step up in that department and, start screening for the oral and throat cancers. So I think it's important for parents to know when deciding whether or not to vaccinate their children is to know that, one, that it doesn't offer full protection. It's currently offering protection against 7 of the 14 high-risk strains of HPV that are associated with cancer, and then 2 of the most common ones that are associated with genital warts. So it's protecting against the strains 6 and 11 for the genital warts, and then 16, 18, and then 5 other ones that are considered high risk. And so I run a support group online on Facebook for women who have been adversely affected by HPV and are having problems with it, causing issues with their cervix. And I have many young women in there who have had the HPV vaccine and were shocked to discover that they have HPV and are having problems with the cervix. And the reason for that is because it doesn't offer full protection. So I think it's really important for people to be aware of that. And so, yes, the vaccine will reduce the risk of oral and throat cancers and also cervical cancer, but it's not, full protection, and it doesn't replace practicing safe sex.
Oh my gosh, the decisions we have to make as parents. And I'm noticing, like, as I'm sitting here listening to, like, all the uncomfortable places that we have to stand in, right? And whether we want to or not, in a lot of cases, all the places where we have to start talking about this stuff with our kids, because they need it, because it's part of their health care.
And here's the thing too. I mean, I know that it's uncomfortable for us to have these conversations with our kids. and it's uncomfortable for our kids to have these conversations with us. However, by us modeling this behavior and providing the space for the kids to be in that uncomfortable place will give them experience and help them to have these uncomfortable conversations with potential future sex partners. Because we do need to have the conversations around safe sex and how we will engage and what do we like. And again, here we go back into the whole pleasure piece is, you know, when you're engaging with somebody sexually, it's, I mean, part of the reason that we do it is because it feels good. And when you have kids being educated on porn, you know, that doesn't really feel good, you know, kind of thing. And so, and if we can't talk about it because, you know, we've never talked to our kids about it, so they have zero experience talking about it, except to maybe their peers who may have fed them, you know, myths and misinformation and who knows what, you know, information that they're getting from these other sources. And so I really think that, you know, by having these important conversations with parents gives kids a leg up in future and will help to keep them safe, you know, not only from sexual predators and, you know, the more scary aspects, but also the, you know, the more subtle, you know, day-to-day per se decisions that we might be making and how we engage with our peers, you know, how your kids are engaging with their peers. And when it comes time to make the decision to whether or not to engage sexually, they'll have, you know, better skills around communication and, you know, what to say, how to say it, how to make sure, you know, their partner is using a condom, even if they object, you know, type thing, and how to navigate these different things, you know, how to navigate a party where there's alcohol and, you know, all these different things. There's just such important conversations to have. And by having these conversations with your children first, it gives them a framework or a basis to go forward and have these conversations with their peers too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it definitely, my experience with having these conversations and being willing to be in the uncomfortable place is that my kids, I've seen them stand up for kids, you know, like recently I heard about a conversation that was just bashing on a kid at school and their expression of their gender and presumably sexuality inside of that. And, you know, my daughter wouldn't stand for it. She was like, no, that's really not okay. And so I know that because I modeled standing in the, you know, being like, this is awkward, this is weird, this is hard. She also has learned how to say, this is weird, this is awkward, this is hard, but this is also right. You know, this is what I believe in, or this is, you know, it's not okay to bash people for this stuff or whatever. And so absolutely our willingness to as parents to be in these conversations with our kids is a huge, like, society level model for our kids going out and being citizens in the world. So if and yet we've covered these enormous topics and we've talked again and again about how big this is. Like, if somebody's wanting to get started, I hear that you have a free gift that can help. And so can you tell us about that? Like, how do you begin?
Yeah, so I have a little cheat sheet, a little checklist that I put together for parents, and it's good for, you know, whatever age your kid is. It starts out with, you know, like babies and goes all the way through, I think, mid-20s. And these are just like different conversations that you can have with your kids. And like the layer of complexity, like we said before, like we can start out really young and talking about like boundaries and permission and things like this to toddlers. And then as they get older, we can add the layers of complexity to the conversation. And so this little checklist is basically something that you can go and look through. It's like, oh, I missed this one, I missed that one. So you can go back and have those conversations and, you know, and then also be thinking in the future too. And let's see, something that's just coming to me right now that I wanted to mention earlier and didn't, but so I'll mention it now, is when you're having these conversations with your, you know, children, you know, it doesn't always have to be you giving information. Part of the way that you can create that open door for having these important conversations is being curious. Ask your kid questions and let them do the talking. And if you're talking more than 20% of the conversation, you're probably talking too much. And one of the reasons that teenagers in particular, will come back at you and say, well, you don't know me, blah, 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 these kinds of things. And it's actually probably fairly true, because we're looking back at, like, this is what we knew our kid to be, and now they're growing, they're in their teenage years, they're developing and, acquiring new aspects of themselves that we haven't had the opportunity to fully experience yet. And they may feel shy about sharing these pieces with you. And so by creating these opportunities for conversations, sitting out on the porch, and drinking lemonade, or going camping, or, having, a sit down meal at dinner, on a nightly basis, or whatever it happens to be, you're creating these opportunities to get to know your child. It's like, you may already know them. Yeah. I mean, of course you birthed them into this world, but they're also becoming their own people, and they're developing their own personalities, and you get to watch that unfold. And so I would encourage, people to be curious. And if you're talking a lot, maybe you're talking too much, and, give kids the chance to express themselves and say what they want to be said, and ask questions, be curious.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of that one.
Yeah, well, and
it's
actually,
easy to get into the parent mode of like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just easy to get in the parent mode of like, oh my gosh, I have all these things I want to tell you, and I waited too long, and so now I have to like blurt them all out. I agree, though, that curiosity is absolutely what gets more response, and we'll drag out we'll not drag out, but like we'll make more room for more conversation because they feel like they're being seen and like they're being heard.
And everybody likes to talk about themselves, I mean, it's really true. Like when you get to meet a new person, it's like, how do you get them to like them? Ask a bunch of questions about them, get them talking about themselves. And that makes them feel like you're interested and you're engaged and you're listening because you're asking pertinent questions and this kind of thing. And so, yeah, curiosity is just amazing. And a really great example of what curiosity could do is my situation where when I was 14 and brought my boyfriend into my home to have sex and we got caught. And so my parents, of course, freaked out. And, as I mentioned before, they ultimately broke us up. But what they didn't do was ask any questions. And maybe they were afraid of the answers. But I think they possibly blamed him when really it was all me. I was the one who initiated that. It was 100% my idea, because I decided that I was going to give to my virginity to a person of my choosing rather than somebody who was trying to take it away from me. And if my parents had been curious and asked me questions as to what my motivation was, what I was thinking, et cetera, they could have discovered all kinds of interesting information, such as perhaps I was being sexually abused, or maybe I really had no clue how to protect myself from getting pregnant, because I thought because dogs got pregnant in the heat that people would do, get pregnant on menstruation. And so there was this a really amazing opportunity that they missed, that they could have found out a lot of interesting information. And there's no guarantee that I would have said anything. I might have denied it all. But the fact is that there just was no opportunity because they were not curious and they didn't ask any questions. Instead, they panicked, they freaked out, and they were like, you're grounded, we're shutting this whole thing down, And so then I was a little hellion. I was a rebel, It's like I was acting out. I was being sexually abused, I mean, it's not my fault. It's just what happened. And so yeah, curiosity. When kids do things that you're like, what the fuck were you thinking? Ask them. Don't say it like that, but ask them. It's like, you never know what you might learn,
Yeah. Well, and if you're already prepared to have difficult questions, if you learn something that you didn't really want to hear, you have prepared yourself for that in other ways, and you can use all those tools again in that moment of, okay, I'm going to take some deep breaths and I'm going to figure this out. And if you've already been comfortable with your kids saying like, I don't know, let's figure that out together, or I don't know the answer to that question, let me find some resources, then this might, that might again be a time where you're like, hey, let's figure this out together.
Yeah. And in a situation like that, had I disclosed, that I was being abused, this type of thing, I mean, I know that no parent wants to hear anything like that, like hear their child was raped or abused or anything like that. But if your child does disclose something to you that you find shocking, it's like you said, just breathe, and, you can hug your child and be like, I love you. This wasn't your fault. I'm here to protect you. We're going to deal with this. And even though you have no idea what you're going to do, you have no idea of like what's going to happen next. It's like, even just saying like those words or something like that can give you space to be like, okay, I'm freaking out. I can breathe. It's like, I'm just going to say these things. I'm just going to sit here and hold my child, and then we'll figure it out from there. It's like, we have resources, we'll figure it out. But, just those first few things in the moment of disclosure can, really be life-changing for a child and can ultimately save their life. I mean, our teen suicide rates are crazy right now. I mean, there's just all kinds of things happening in our world. And so, that really just brings me back to why it's so important for parents to be having these important conversations.
Absolutely. Connection is the thing that I also believe that connection is the thing that saves us from the trauma, or makes the trauma, makes us capable of really healing from and dealing with, and, learning to address the trauma. Like, also being a childhood abuse survivor, there's, I've heard so many stories of women who said that when they told their parents or whatever about abuse or rape or whatever, and they got that like, oh, don't tell anybody, like, oh my God, like, and their parents freaked out on it, that almost that was the thing that was more, I mean, I don't want to say more painful, but it added to instead of subtracted from. Anytime that we feel like someone's in something really difficult with us, I think it does convey that sense of like, oh, I could be okay. Like, I have someone here with me. I'm not alone. And so we don't add to the trauma of it.
Yeah. And, along those lines, I know it can be really difficult to hear when a child discloses something, especially if it's, the abuser is somebody that which a lot of times, people are either sexually abused or sexually assaulted by people that they know. The stranger danger, while it's a thing, it's certainly the least of the real dangers, that your child may be faced with. And so, having that non-judgmental reaction, even if you're like, oh, that person would never do that, kind of thing. It's like, don't say those words out loud, instead, like I said, have your more supportive face on, and then you can figure out the facts later. But, it's really important for your child to feel like they've been heard and seen and believed, kind of thing. Because if they're not believed, then it just shuts them down even more. And it may be harder to ever get them back to the point of where they'll actively confide in you and be trusting.
Right. And to kind of full circle it, that practice of just even consent talks when they're little or whatever, not only primes them for being able to tell you when there's something going on they need help with, but it primes you for being ready to hold and handle and address that thing. Because you have this history together of healthy conversations that have been these like, long unfolding, as the child, along with their developmental status at the moment and all that stuff. And that alone just creates this history, this foundation that allows both the child to come back to you and ask for help from you so that you get to have your input there, and allows you to actually practice what it takes should you ever be in that position with your child or some other child. or some other person, a friend, anybody really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. These skills can make us better citizens on the planet for everybody.
Exactly.
And I think that's part of, really where we're going with this is, how can we raise children who are empathetic, compassionate, kind, who are capable of having these healthy relationships. And I think our planet will definitely be a better place for it.
Me too. So grateful for this whole summit and all the things that you've gathered together here. It's just really, in the middle of the hard things and just so lovely and hopeful. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm, thank you. Yeah.
So we mentioned a couple things about free gifts and stuff. How do people get those from you?
Yeah, so I'm going to post all that stuff on the website. And so as I mentioned, I do have my checklist cheat sheet. And then I'm also putting together a brand new free gift for everybody too. I'm putting the finishing touches on that today. And that will be ready on the website either today, depending on when I finish it, or I will send it to you through the email, either way. But that is 3 easy ways to ease into conversations with your kids about sex. So if you're struggling having some of these, some of these conversations, like if some of the stuff that we talked about today, like pushed your buttons, like maybe the idea of talking about masturbation with your son or your daughter, or sexual abuse or rape, or any of these really uncomfortable or hard topics, this gift will help you to set the stage and find ways to open the doors to those conversations. So I'm really excited about that. I think that will be really helpful for a lot of our viewers. And then as part of the upgrade package, I am offering a 2-hour webinar on all about the female reproductive cycle. So if you want to talk to your daughter about menstruation and have all of the facts and information that go along with that whole transition through puberty and how the fertility cycle actually works, understand the hormonal dance that's going on and this kind of thing, this webinar will give you all of that really great information. It will fill in any gaps that you miss, because there's definitely a lot of missing information in our science classes and our textbooks. I even went and got a gynecological textbook because I wanted to know what the doctors were learning about the female cycle, because a lot of gynecologists are helping people get pregnant. And so if you don't actually understand how the female body works, I've run into a lot of couples who are trying to conceive who actually had their timing off because they didn't fully understand how the female cycle works. And so here they are thinking that they're having all these problems getting pregnant, that they need, intervention because she can't get pregnant and this kind of thing. And it turns out it was as simple as having sex too late and missing that window of fertility. And once they figured out that little piece of information, ta-da, baby on the way, kind of thing. And so really just having that information is so important. It can, it can give you basic information about your health. If something is going on and something changes, you will have more information that you can bring to your doctor to help problem solving. And in the case of, this lady who was trying to get pregnant and was running into problems, you won't have, that issue of, having a doctor tell you what to do and then have it be not quite right information. And then you're thinking you're having all these problems when actually you were totally fine. And it was just bad information. So
it's empowering in both ways. It's empowering whether you're trying to have a baby or whether you're trying not to have a baby. I mean, to know how your body works is just.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, this information was the missing piece that I didn't get from my mom. And when I had this understanding of how my cycle actually works and that I could apply this information, this, charting my cycle, monitoring my fertility signal has been my method of avoiding conception for 25 years. And it's just been amazing. I mean, I have this incredible relationship with my body. It started in my early 20s, and it changed my life. I mean, it's part of the reason that I am here with you right now. And feel like it's super important for parents to have this information, this education, so that they can give it to their daughters. Because man, when I learned this stuff, it was life-changing for me. It was eye-opening. It was like it just like blew my mind. And I was just like, what if my mom could like have taught me this information? And yeah, I know, teenagers don't want to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. But here's the secret is if you like start these conversations before they're 10 years old, they'll just drink this information in like a sponge. And it's before like the crazy preteen, like, I don't want to talk to you, teenage years, come on. And it's not too early to give this information because, like I said, kids are being exposed at a super young age, and they're not necessarily being exposed to the greatest information that they could be. And you can change that. You have the power.
That's inspiring. Let's all go do it.
Yes.
So they can start with the quick start or the checklist thing, and the ways to start those conversations, like kind of how to get started, just kind of setting up the whole conversation thing to begin with. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really, really big help for moms. And I also want to let everybody know too that we're going to be doing a live Q&A call on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And some of our speakers are going to be joining us. So you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, give feedback. I know we all would love to hear, how you, how you appreciated the interviews, whether they were good for you, if there was something that was missing. I actually have interest in continuing doing these interviews over the course of the year. So as that plan takes shape, I will definitely let everybody know about that. And in the meantime, if you're interested in the recordings, we've had just so many amazing speakers. There's been 20 interviews over the course of this interview series. And every one of them has just been packed full of like gems of information. And if you missed any of them, I highly recommend going back and listening to them all. And if you joined us late, then it's true the majority of the interviews at this point are part of the upgrade package. But the good news is the Summit Special is still happening. And for today, you can still get all of the recordings, over 20 hours of really just amazing information for parents and educators. You can get it for $97. The price is going to go up tonight at midnight. And yeah, so you can like download the video and the audio so you can listen to it however is most convenient for you. And plus, some of our speakers have given some really amazing upgrade bonuses. You'll get my my cycle mastery class, which is the 2-hour webinar. Another one of my favorite ones is a bonus donated by Christian Michelson. This is a really great program. He teaches some really powerful tools that can help kids process their feelings, and which is really good for us too. It can help us like when that whole like, oh my God, I can't talk about this topic comes up, tools to help address those feelings that are happening in your body so that you can kind of move beyond that and then actually do have these conversations. So I appreciate him a lot for sharing this program with everybody, because these tools have really been life-changing for me. I've been using them for the last 2 years, and they've definitely made a huge impact on my life. And I think that, these will be really valuable for you personally and also to share with your kids. So another cool bonus is Catherine Dean. She was speaking about money, and I haven't had the opportunity to check out her first module from her program, but I have the feeling that's going to be really awesome. And there's other, ebooks that people have given. There's a couple other programs and webinars that people have given. And so just some really fantastic resources, all available as part of the upgrade package. And you can get all of that stuff for just $97. Again, the price goes up tonight. But yeah, I mean, I didn't actually total up the value of the upgrade package, but I know like Christian's program, he's got a $2,000 price tag on that, and Catherine's, her program is like $1,500. So it's some really valuable things that our speakers have given us. So really a great opportunity to get more of them if you're interested.
Yeah, it sounds like a great place to start gathering those tools that you need to get started, huh?
It really is. And like some of these interviews are just so full of information that, you know, I've gone through and listened to them a couple times already, just taking notes and stuff. And it's just, yeah, some really fantastic resources. And I love doing these events. It's so fun to go and pick other people's brains and learn what they're passionate about, and weave all this information together to, you know, to share with everybody. So it's been a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing with all of us today. It was just a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, I hope it was really helpful. And if anybody has any questions, I'm always available. Feel free to email me, and join us on Sunday and bring your questions live. We would definitely like to have opportunity to see all of your beautiful faces and hear how this interview series has inspired you to talk to your kids about some of these different things. So I look forward to that. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Jill, for being here with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks to everybody who joined us, because these conversations are so important. Thank you.
Thank you.